So Friday night again, Friday night fun. Have you got a brew?
Hello, Monster.
No, Steve. I'm going to have to stop recording now so you can edit that bit out. No, I'm only joking. Did you enjoy last week's edition of, I've had to recall it something because there's another coach with something very similar. Oh, wait, Donna's here. So I didn't want to get called out for bloody, what's it called, copyright or something.
Yeah.
So this is the new name, SME Roundtable, like the Knights of SME.
So we can have Monster then, can we now? So it's not coffee.
No, the rule still applies, Steve, no matter what we call it. Sausage. So this week, we're going to go through a little bit about muscle gain. I think it's quite an elusive topic. Not many people either get to a position they're in a muscle gaining phase in. So I know Kaylee, we're trying to move down that road with you at the minute, which is working a treat. Steve, you're putting yourself in a position where where the goal will be muscle gain, and that'll be quite soon, won't it, Steve?
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. And the other three of us in here are already either been through a muscle gaining phase, so we already have a bit of experience, or we're in it at the minute. I think Donna's in a muscle gaining phase as well, right?
Yeah, we're bringing up areas on Donna. When she's finished cleaning a kitchen.
Yeah, multitasking. Donna. So, like we did last week, I'll have it as a subject, but if you want to interrupt, ask questions, etc., get out of this session what you want to get out of it. I've put some slides together. Took me bloody days to do this. Oh my God. Took me like 10 seconds to put them together, but the information around it is going to be there. So Claire, you've been in a muscle gaining phase. Just give us a bit of background about if you've been in more than one, what it looked like for you, a little bit of a roundup for the round table.
Yeah, I think obviously for me, I've always trained, but purposefully probably not been in. I have a big appetite, don't I? So food's always been pretty decent, like calorie wise has always been higher for me. And then along obviously with the training as well, more structured when I met you and actually started tracking calories, protein and things like that. Hence a better body composition now, as opposed to just probably the nutrient quality being lesser back in the day, maybe.
Yeah, so you was in an unintentional muscle gaining phase.
Yeah, that's how I got a decent amount of muscle on me.
Yeah, so there are going to be factors, and eating enough is obviously one of the factors or one of the ways that we're going to be gaining muscle tissue. But we all know, because if it was that easy as eating more, then rather than all being fat as fuck, we'd all be in shape, right? So there's a lot of different variables that go into gaining muscle, probably a lot more than what people think. Not you guys, because obviously you all have some form of understanding, whether or not you've been through it yourself or you're part of the SME crew, so you kind of have an understanding. But even your understanding, there might be a little bit more detail that you're unaware of. So this is what this session is going to be about. And also, I think for a lot of people, the potential struggles, because a lot of people do struggle in this phase.
Yeah,
it is completely different to a fat loss phase in terms of not just what you're doing, but also psychologically what can happen in that phase as well. So, little task. Task number one. You don't have to write it down, but let's just have a brainstorm about all the things that we have to consider when in a muscle gaining phase. So we already give you one of those things, which is eating enough. So eating enough total calories is going to play a part when it comes to gaining muscle. You can't gain muscle. This is going to be quite controversial, but you can't gain a substantial amount of muscle in a calorie deficit. You can actually gain a little bit, but if we're thinking about putting on a lot of muscle tissue, you're not going to be able to do that in a calorie deficit. So eating enough total calories is going to be key. What other things do you guys think we need to consider when we're trying to put on muscle?
Higher protein intake.
Yeah, so we got to eat enough protein. What's your target on protein, Steve?
160, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
And you're in a deficit, so obviously when we're in a muscle gaining phase, we're going to need a little bit more because obviously total calories will be up, which is exciting. Go on, Scott.
Scott's on a lot.
House and home.
You're getting in the way there. She's trying to clean the sides.
What protein are you on?
Protein, about 325, I think, 330, something like that.
Jesus, are you a professional bodybuilder?
Yeah, he's an athlete.
What are you eating? What are you eating? 10 steaks a day or something? Jesus.
Feels like it.
That'd be easier.
Are you even managing to go to the toilet? Jesus Christ. I bet you stink. Yeah. Well, it's all relative to size and obviously what your body can handle, because digesting protein is quite a energy expensive process for our body to handle. So if you do get any digestion issues, if your protein is so high, then you might want to have a look at that, but it's all individual. Right, so yes, Steve, perfect. We have enough protein, we've got enough calories. What's the main obvious one? Everything what we do when we go in the gym? It seems.
Training?
Yes, and in specific, Donna, what kind of training?
Progressive overload.
Well, oh yeah, we're fucking getting scientific now. She's there. Claire's doing sign language, hoping that she gets it right. It's like a pub quiz. Should be called Sam's pub quiz. Yeah, but just one before that, resistance training, because you ain't going to put muscle on by running a marathon, are you? So we need to be prioritising resistance training, where Donna, well, everyone in this group is doing, aren't they? Our main form of training is going to be resistance training. Before I move on to the specifics, can anyone think of anything else that we have to consider when we're gaining muscle tissue? Because obviously we've already come away from the fact that you can't just eat and expect to gain muscle tissue. So are there any other things that you think about when you're wanting to gain muscle tissue, or is there anything that we tell you to focus on from your check-ins, other variables?
Your recovery.
Yeah. Recovery indeed. Do you want to add any more details to that, Claire?
I think everyone thinks obviously they're going to get to a certain point quicker the more they throw at it, because I know I will use Scott an example, like it probably killed him training 4 times per week rather than me putting them on 5 and 6, which a lot of people think they need to do. So obviously it's that time out of the gym to let the muscle tissue repair, things like that, and your sleep and recovery is going to be up there.
Yeah. So if we're hitting up 4 good quality training sessions per week, some people, again, it's very individual.
Yeah.
But we have to fully recover to be able to grow. So has anyone heard the saying that you grow in your sleep? Like obviously when you're a kid, your parents tell you to go to bed early because you'll never grow and all this.
That's why I'm little.
Yeah, but I don't get no sleep. Well, there's a little bit of truth behind that, because your muscles are repairing at rest. So when we're asking about how's your sleep been, how's your quality of sleep been, it's not so that you're not a moody bastard when we see you in the gym. It's because we want to make sure that you're recovering properly. So recovery does play a massive part. So I'll go through the factors that I've come up with. There's probably more than this, to be fair, but like I said, it only took me 10 minutes to get together. And then as I'm going through, hopefully, as I'm explaining, if you are in a muscle gaining phase, oh, there we go. It's more than just eating and training hard. Hey. And then what we'll get to is the potential struggles that people have with gaining muscle, because it's all right having all these factors put in place, but then executing all these different variables when you're a fucking human and not just a robot, does become harder when you put it into practice, unless you're a robot like Claire. Who just grows muscle for fun. She don't even train hard.
Hey, yeah, I do.
The genetic freak. All right, so nutrition. So like we've already discussed, there's going to be eating enough total calories. So Scott, how many calories are you on at the minute?
Training and rest. Go on.
4,300 training days and 4,000 non-training days.
Yeah, so in the beginning, when you got given these calories, but we also say eating nutrient-dense foods, was that a struggle?
No.
No, it's just like food. To be fair, it won't be a struggle for me either, but yeah, I just get
You've had to build up, though, haven't you?
Yeah.
You didn't start on them calories. You built
No.
up gradually.
Yeah, it's a bit.
And it wasn't. That's a lie. That was a struggle because when your calories first got increased, you flapped,
yeah.
and then you did. You was like, "How am I going to eat all this food?" But because you've done gradually, you've just increased your portions, and I'd give you an extra meal and.
Just do what Steve does and drink vodka for his calories. Oh, really, don't do that, guys, if you're watching this back on repeat. So we've already hit a potential struggle that people might face. If you're a hard gainer, and by that I mean you really have to force the food in, some people can actually gain muscle tissue in a slight calorie surplus, but a lot of people have to force the food in. And if we're not consistent enough by getting those calories in, then that's going to be a number one struggle for growing. Because if we need to get calories in to grow muscle and we're not getting the food in, we ain't going to be gaining muscle tissue. So that's number one struggle already, right? Without even going into the other things. So that's going to be key. What measures can we put in place if appetite is an issue?
Protein shakes, obviously, if they're struggling to actually eat the meals.
Sum it up with your thing.
Was it? Did you get any of that?
Reaching at me. Protein shakes, yeah.
Right. Like I don't know, higher calorie food, so swapping. Like I have like really lean mince and milk, but maybe swapping it for like the blue milk instead of the red milk.
Yeah, spot on, hun, because that increases the fat content, and calories in fats are a lot higher than lean proteins. So opting for your fattier protein options, as long as they digest well, is going to be a good swap. So if you are someone who struggles with appetite in a surplus, and we know that we have to get the calories in, then higher calorie foods for sure. And also, like, introducing more fun foods into your diet, so you don't have to eat quote unquote clean foods all the time. If you are struggling, it don't matter if you bump up your calories. Like one of my clients at the minute, I've introduced a muffin every single day just to get those total calories in, because it's gone in like 2 bites. And that's the difference with him losing or gaining muscle. So eating enough protein, we've already covered. Has anyone eaten too much protein and suffered? No, not got to that bit yet. Not suffered from the eggy farts. Donna's like, yeah, me.
That happened before. I was eating all protein.
So there's a struggle. We're splitting up marriages with the eggy farts. And has anyone considered or been told about splitting your protein up throughout the day?
Yeah, make it
Each
equal.
meal.
Yeah, each meal.
Yeah. So does anyone know the reason for that in a muscle gaining phase? No.
Yeah.
Claire?
Well, obviously, you want to support protein synthesis and muscle mass as well. So it doesn't make sense to have all your protein in one go and then for cravings and feeling fuller as well.
Yeah. So has anyone ever heard us say at least 25 grams of protein per meal? Yeah. Yeah, you should have heard that. And that's to trigger something called muscle protein synthesis. Now, without going into too much detail, this is how our body stimulates that muscle growing process. So if we're not stimulating that across the day, we go into something called catabolism, where you become catabolic, and we kind of want to stay in an anabolic state where we're growing. So in a dieting phase, we would tell people to split the protein up throughout the day to maintain muscle mass and obviously manage hunger. but there's also a reason in a muscle gaining phase where it makes sense to split it up across the day. So if you're not already doing that, then I suggest that you split it up. And obviously it's hard to eat a lot of protein in one go. Sorry if you can hear Frank drinking in the background. Just to go through the other bits as well, considerations for muscle gain, choosing foods choices which digest well. So foods which are not going to cause bloating. Does anybody know why that would be an issue in a muscle gaining phase? Claire?
Well, if you're already bloated, you're not going to try and want to force more food in. So you want it to digest and then in time for obviously your next meal, especially if it's around training, things like that.
Exactly. The key reason why we don't want food choices that are affecting digestion is because it's going to affect appetite. Nobody's want to be eating food when they're feeling bloated from the last meal. So if you've got foods in your diet at the minute, cause all of you guys, is Donna and Scott, are you on a set plan or flexible?
They're both flexible.
Yeah. So making sure that you're not eating anything that causes too much bloating. And the last one, drinking enough water. That goes without saying. All bodily processes slow down if we're not drinking enough water. Yeah. So already in nutrition, there's already 6 things there that we have to consider when gaining muscle tissue. So it's not just about eating enough. Coming on to training. Donna, you already said it, but prioritising resistance training. Joanne Gell, got your scientific word in there as well. Progressive overload. So bonus points for telling us what it means.
You know it, Donna, it's not a trick question.
It is. You get kicked out of the group if you don't answer correctly.
So progressing with your weights and your reps and that.
Yeah.
And I know with Claire, we've been doing a lot of like tempo work, can't we, slowing it down and stuff like that, and muscle connection and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Progressive overload is pretty much what you've just said. Why is that important in a muscle gaining phase? Why can't we just go in the gym and do exactly the same thing each time, which a lot of people fall into the trap of doing?
You want to create new stimulus each time. So if you go in, you've got 2 sets and you're counting to 10 each time, obviously it's not any new shock to a system. Your body's going to adapt to it, get used to it. So obviously you want to progress with each session, and that's probably where the logbook comes in handy for a lot of people, rather than just going in and winging it.
Yeah. So if we think about it on a basic level, as human beings, our bodies don't know what a gym is. Our bodies don't know what a dumbbell is, what a resistance machine is. All they know is what we are picking up and putting down. That is pretty much, when you think about it, what training is. We're just moving things, aren't we? But we're trying to keep tension. Our body has got 2 choices. When we're in a muscle gaining phase, we can either use those nutrients that are floating around the body in excess to gain fat, or we can gain muscle and fat. And if we're not giving the body enough reason to put muscle tissue on, guess what happens when we're in a calorie surplus? We get fat as fuck. Yeah. Now you might not be able to see that you're gaining that much muscle tissue in a muscle gaining phase. So this is one of the struggles that I'll come on to, because people's heads can fall off because they're not necessarily seeing the muscle tissue that they're gaining, because we are going to be gaining body fat at the same time. But if we're logbooking like Claire says, and our lifts are going up and we're improving with tempo and time under tension, then we know that our bodies have to adapt and gain muscle tissue. That's why the logbooking is important in a muscle gaining phase. Training to failure. Has anybody had a PT session and gone to failure? Yeah. Hated it. Steve has.
Yeah, I'm really sick that last time.
Yeah. If you've never trained to failure before, it's a little bit of a wake-up call, isn't it? But it becomes quite addictive, I think.
Addicted?
Come over when it's better to the after that.
So the rep ranges in your plans are only used as a guide. You should be trying to push to failure where possible, obviously with good form. to elicit that new response. And that's how we're going to get progressive overload. There's other factors that come into play from a coaching perspective. So when we're planning your training plans, we'll take into consideration training frequency. So how often you're training that muscle. So you might have trained previously and done what we call a bro split, where you're splitting body parts up and training, going in, training arms or training delts. And then you come in training with us and then we're going, right, we want you to train upper lower now. And you're like, oh, how am I going to get a response from that? Well, you're actually training your muscles more frequently across the week. So we're getting a more adaptive stimulus because our body's having to lift that weight more frequently. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if we think like, oh, she's put me on lower upper, I must be shit, I must be regressing. Well, you're not. You're actually doing more because you're training that muscle more frequently across the week. And then training volume just means the amount of sets and reps that we get you to do. So as you get stronger, what we might do is reduce the amount of sets that you do. So on your plan, you might have one top set and one back off set. Does anybody have that on any of their things? Yeah. Why do you think we would reduce the training volume instead of putting it up? Claire?
Well, so you're not fucked as well. There's only so many times that you can do that. Is that me echoing, or you? There's only so many times, obviously, you can do that. You're not going to give someone 3 sets of like 8 to 10 wanting to go to failure because they'll be fucked.
Yeah, it's individual. So if you start off and you've got like 4 sets on an exercise and then we update your training plan and we've actually reduced the volume, it's a good chance that you're actually getting stronger, more accurate with your training. So in order for you to recover from that volume, because if you remember in the nutrition bit, then we're focusing on full recovery. If we're giving you too much training volume, you're not going to be able to recover from it. Thus, you're not going to be able to grow any muscle tissue. So you've probably seen people train in the gym and it looks like they're on a machine for about an hour doing the same thing, thinking that the more that they do, it's probably better. When in fact, if you look at them people in a year, they probably look exactly the same, which we don't want for you guys. Any other considerations that you can think of I've not covered when you're thinking about gaining muscle? I know your heads are probably like, fucking hell, I just thought I needed to train a bit harder and eat more. No? All right. Some of the things I've already covered, but sleep is a massive thing. So if you are one of these people where you're smashing it in the gym, you're smashing your nutrition, but you're sleeping 4 hours a night, that is your area of focus for the next however long it gets you to get your sleep back on track. Has anyone got shit sleep?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys. How would you describe the amount of sleep that you get usually?
Average.
Average. So are we talking less than 6 hours a night?
No, more than 6 hours.
More than 6 hours. You're laughing. You're all right. But the sleep quality. So if you don't use an app or anything like that to monitor your sleep, you don't have to. I don't necessarily think we need to. But if you're waking up tired, then this is an indication that we need to focus on your sleep, especially in a muscle gaining phase. It becomes even more important than a calorie deficit. Stress levels. Has anybody had check-ins where we've discussed stress and how to manage stress and why stress is important to manage? Or just think we're being nosy bastards? Might be a combination of both, to be fair. No, but stress also plays havoc with muscle gain. If our body is in a stressed out state, I won't go into too much science because it is late on a Friday. There's only 10 minutes left. But we go what's called into the sympathetic nervous system. Has anyone heard of fight or flight?
Yeah.
Yeah. So our bodies spend time in fight or flight. And it's only when we spend time in our parasympathetic nervous system, so rest and digest, where we actually are allowing our body to grow. So when we're stressed, we haven't evolved actually that much from 10,000 years ago, physiologically. Our body doesn't know whether we're having a stressful day or whether we're trying to get ready to run away from a bear. Yeah, our body will respond exactly the same. So if you're stressed all the time, it might be that we focus on things like meditation, even though it sounds airy-fairy, going out for walks, just to allow us to get out of this sympathetic nervous system. Because at the end of the day, trying to gain muscle tissue, and that is our priority. We're not asked whether or not you want to do yoga or anything. We want to make sure that you're gaining muscle tissue. So these are all things that play a part. And then obviously for the females, time of the month can play havoc. We won't go into too much detail about that, Scott and Stay, don't worry. I'm sure you all know about that anyway. I'm sure you're affected by it as well. And then your fitness levels and injury status can play a part as well. So obviously the main bit of today was the factors where people struggle to gain muscle mass. Oh, got me 10-minute cut off. Stop chatting. So based on everything that we've said, obviously we've already said about appetite, which is something that people struggle with. If you don't eat enough, you're not going to gain any muscle tissue. Based on your experiences of when you've been in muscle gaining phases, what things have you guys struggled with? Because it's not all plain sailing unless it is.
Obviously getting a little bit, once you start seeing the lines disappear and probably expanding a little bit more, obviously being a little person, it is harder to think, right, you're gonna maybe not go too far the other way. Obviously it's hard to let go of that leanness sometimes.
Yeah, from a psychological perspective.
Yeah.
Are you the same, Donna?
Well, I'm more thinking of Scott, because you did, don't pump all that face. You did struggle when you went from your cut to gaining. You did start clapping, going, what if the love handles come back, or quite like having these lines on my tummy. You did on his abs. You did.
Yeah, I went ages ago. I'm fine now.
And it's one of the main reasons why people don't gain muscle mass on a noticeable basis, because people switch too frequently between, right, I'm in a muscle gaining phase, right, 2 months later, right, I've put too much weight on, I need to do a mini cut. And all you're doing is you're treading water. You're not really going anywhere. So you have to be able to do it in a way where you're not gaining body fat too quickly, because obviously it's easy to eat takeaways every single night and gain too much body fat, but also being aware that body fat is part of the process. So this is why, especially mainly for females, obviously it happens for guys as well, but in our experience, female clients very rarely see out a muscle gaining phase, which is why Claire gets it now, where clients or people will say to her, oh, I want to gain muscle, but I don't want to gain as much muscle as you. Yeah. But it's no fault of their own. It's just that they're not educated in how long and how many variables have to be controlled to gain that level of muscle tissue. Some people, when they lean down for the first time, they're like, oh, I'm happy with how I am right now. I'll just stay like this and go into a maintenance phase, and that's fine. But for you guys who are wanting to put a considerable amount of muscle tissue on, you need to commit to it for a long period of time. Are there any tips what you did, Claire, when you was in your muscle gaining phase, which took away the fear almost of gaining body fat?
Well, I think you're not going to bring up areas if you don't leave that area, because I think for me it was always bringing up like I need to strengthen glutes and things like that. But I was more mindful of
someone who's scared. Obviously, what would you do as a tip? So things like wearing baggy clothes.
Yeah, just what you're comfortable. Like, don't try and fit in things that are going to make you feel, I don't want to say fat, but make you feel on the chunky side. Like, just be comfortable, like looser clothes, stretchy pants, embrace it.
One tip I had in prep was an off-season wardrobe and a prep wardrobe. No shit. And it was literally 2 sizes bigger. But I felt okay because I was in my off-season wardrobe, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Another tip is focusing heavily on your gym performance. Get obsessive with your logbook. There's no better feeling, I don't know if you guys are the same, than getting stronger and getting PBs in the gym. And as long as you're doing that, you know that you're gaining muscle tissue anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So focusing on that long-term goal. Another thing that I focused on last week as well is underpinning why you want to gain muscle tissue. Like if it's literally just, I want to gain muscle tissue because, I don't know, I want to look better, then when things start getting a little bit less, well, when things get blurry and the lines start to leave, that isn't going to be enough to keep you on track. You need to start thinking about what's the main reason why you want to do it. Do you want to improve your body confidence? Do you want to feel like when you walk in a room, people are thinking, fucking hell, he's massive? Yeah. What other struggles do you think people will come or you might experience? I'll just reel them off because obviously the time's going to run out. So people get fat too quick. Yeah. That then comes back to them having to lose muscle, lose body fat again. Does anybody in this room have gained muscle tissue, gained body fat too quick and had to diet down again?
Me. Waffle.
All that's doing, we're going back to that, what we just said, and we're treading water, taking time away from when we could be gaining muscle tissue. Yeah. So we've all made that mistake. Claire thought one of her 4 meals a day was a waffle. So she didn't even include that within her calories. You can use that one, Donna.
You know.
Right. She calls me all the time anyway. But as well, like people don't respect how long it takes and the variables that are come into play with muscle gain. So even though people might be eating enough total calories, if they're not eating enough protein and all those calories are coming from carbohydrates and fats, then they're not going to be gaining muscle tissue. So the fact that you're in a group of like-minded individuals at the minute, coaches that kind of have a understanding of how to get you to where you want to be, you're already at an advantage to 99% of people, especially the ones that don't have a coach. So hopefully that was a little bit useful. Does anyone have any questions, any things they want to bring up, any useful tips?
I'd like to ask you, how long would you be in a muscle gain phase for?
Yeah, go on, Claire, you can answer this one.
How long's a piece of string? Like it's
Yeah.
going to differ for everybody.
Yeah, it's pretty much for the first time, especially. So if somebody's not been in a muscle gaining phase, it's kind of the same question as how long is this diet going to last? Well, we don't know until you actually commit to it and start going with it and actually executing the plan with accuracy and consistency. And that's the key in a muscle gaining phase. Everyone thinks that they get more flexibility in a muscle gaining phase. And in fact, the only really difference is that you get more calories and that's it. Everything else has to be bang on. I'd even go as far to say it's harder. Well, it's a lot harder to gain muscle tissue. It's easy once you get to a position where you've established that amount of muscle tissue to maintain it. Things become a lot more flexible then, like where I'm at the minute and where Claire is. But to put on new muscle tissue, it's a task. And in terms of time, the slower the better, really. As an estimate, you kind of want to be gaining around 0.5 pound a week. Yeah, so that's a slow and steady rate gain. And for everyone in here, to my knowledge, everybody's natural as well. So it's a slower rate of gain for people who are naturally, as opposed to if you was assisted. So that's a massive difference as well. So when you see on Instagram, oh, I've gained 12 pounds of muscle this month. Yeah, you've also probably been injected fucking cow semen. You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference. So only try and compare yourself to natural people. The last time I did my muscle gaining phase, I put on 50 pounds and only 11 pounds of that was muscle because I did a DEXA scan. So what you put on the scale isn't necessarily going to be lean muscle tissue. Yeah. And because you've all been through a dieting phase, once you get to that real shredded position, you realise just how little muscle mass you actually do have, don't you?
Yeah.
So when you start freaking out, oh, I'm gaining too much body fat in this muscle gaining phase, how shit would it be to do another diet and look exactly the same? So keep that in the back of your mind when you're struggling with this muscle gaining phase. If anybody's got any more questions, just put a message in the group, because I've got less than a minute because I've just chatted on for 40 minutes. Yeah. Hopefully you got a bit out of that. And yeah, if you've got any further questions, put it in the Facebook group if you don't mind. I'll answer it on there. Enjoy your Friday and your weekend.
All right. Thanks, guys.
There.
See you later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.